The following is a Live the Dream Media production.
Welcome to Conversations with Ed. Please make sure to subscribe and share.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Ed. We have the privilege today to have my friend, Major General Ted Maxwell. I'm going to say retired, but I don't know if you ever retire as a general officer, who was commander of the 162nd Airborne here and knows more about military stuff than I will ever know. Ted, why don't you give us a little Reader's Digest on Ted when you got to Tucson, Pima County area?
Well, thank you, Ed, and I appreciate being here. I'm especially honored to be one of your first podcasts. So Conversations with Ed is going to probably cover a lot of different topics. I'm glad that you wanted to talk about military on one of the first ones. I grew up in California, but then attended the United States Air Force Academy, graduated in 1984, and immediately went to what's now Mesa Gateway in Arizona. So my active duty military career started here at the old Williams Air Force Base. Served there for about 4 years as both a student and an instructor, and then I went transitioned to F-16s, and that was what my Air Force career has been as an F-16 pilot. Stayed in the active duty about 15 years, but that's when I moved to Tucson. At the time, for a lot of reasons, I decided I was going to get out of the active duty and I was going to go join the Air National Guard. As it turned out, I joined the Air National Guard right here in Tucson, the 162nd Fighter Wing at the time, and it's located on Tucson International Airport. A lot of people are aware of those planes when they go out, fly in and out of Tucson. They go, oh yeah, there are a lot of little small planes down there at the end, military-looking aircraft. Well, we've got the largest F-16 wing now in the nation that's located out at Tucson International. So I moved here in 1999 thinking I'd be here for 5 years, and honestly, I fell in love with the region. I enjoyed flying still, and so I ended up serving another 19 and a half years. And my last 2 years where I became a major general was as the commander of the Arizona Air National Guard. So I got to oversee not only the 162nd, which I'd never become the commander of the 162nd. I've been the vice commander down there, but as the commander of the Arizona Air National Guard, I got to oversee both the 162nd and the 161st, which is our Air Force Air National Guard unit located up at Sky Harbor International Airport. And we've actually got the fifth, at least when I retired, we were still the fifth largest Air National Guard in the United States.
Wow. Well, I want to tell you, and I want to tell all our listeners, a lot of times it's General and Mayor, and a lot of times it's Ted and Ed. General Maxwell, Ted Maxwell, and I have been friends for many years, so we may go back and forth on that. But when I called you to ask you to come on the podcast and talk to us, I had heard on the national news about Ukrainian pilots training on the F-16s at the 162nd. And I thought that was an anomaly. I really, ignorance of, and I've been there many times. You said we do so much more. Could you expand on a little bit about what the mission is at the 162nd?
Absolutely. The 162nd, in my mind, and of course I'm biased because I spent 14 years flying F-16s there. It is one of the Air Force's secrets, and in a lot of ways it's an international treasure. When I got to Tucson in 99, we trained about 50% of our students were U.S. pilots, and about 50% were international. And at the time, we had our long-term partnerships with pilots out of Bahrain, and pilots from the Netherlands and from Belgium, from the folks that people are accustomed to knowing flew F-16s and Air Force aircraft. Well, after 9/11, not only did we stand up an alert detachment, which still exists to this date over at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and is manned by 162nd personnel 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that stood up within days after 9/11. But the other thing that changed in our mission at the 162nd at that time is we went to nearly 100% international training. And we've trained every country that flies the F-16 except one. And that just happens to be Egypt for the trivia question. Right. But there's, over 20 countries now that fly the F-16 worldwide, and every single one of them has come to Tucson here and actually trained there. Sometimes we're creating brand new pilots. Sometimes they bring in seasoned pilots and they want to do advanced training with us. And sometimes we actually deploy up to Nellis Air Force Base for red flag exercises, which are the big simulated war games, and we'll do that with them as well. So this unit in Tucson has had a large impact, not only on the ability for our partners to defend themselves, but also for that international connectivity of our country with some of the other countries we rely on throughout the world.
Well, you have a lot of amenities. You have the Goldwater Range, and you said that bombing practice or training pilots and things of that nature. And you fly up over the White Mountains, where I have a cabin. Don't use me as practice, but expand on why the 162nd not only have great personnel and great training facilities, but the amenities that we have around here to make it such a successful mission.
Well, Mayor Honey, it is absolutely, we'll stay with Mayor in general for the time being, is absolutely about what we have in Arizona. There is a reason the Marines train aviation in Arizona. The Army trains aviation in Arizona. And the Air Force and the Air National Guard train aviation in Arizona at multiple locations. You've got Davis-Monthan, you've got Tucson, you've got Fort Huachuca, you've got Yuma Marine Corps Air Station, you've got Luke Air Force Base.
Right.
Those are all large units in and of themselves, but we can do it in Arizona for multiple reasons. One, the amount of airspace available to train is just absolutely critical. And the size. As we get to more modern weaponry and technology, we need more and more space to truly train like we would fight. And in Arizona, you've got the Barry Goldwater Range, you've got the airspace surrounding the Goldwater Range that effectively goes all the way from I-19 all the way to the California border, and from the border all the way up to I-8. That's all military airspace we can train that does not have any civilian traffic, commercial traffic, traveling through it. So it's a big space. Same thing down at Fort Huachuca. Above that, we've got airspace, and over the White Mountains and north of Phoenix. Arizona, when you look at it, is a country that we've got population centers, but a state that we've got population centers, but we're mostly landmass. It's Arizona. We sometimes forget how big Arizona is, but because of that, and then you combine it with the weather, we lose maybe 5 flying days a year in this state. So you can have aviation training going on all the time. I'd love to say that all the military, instructors here are the greatest in the world, and I think we are. But the fact of the matter is, we have the ability that we can take somebody and teach them how to fly, because we can fly them every other day without break. I mean, learning to drive, if we all remember when we did that, if we took a month off in between each time we stepped in the car, it would have been very difficult. Well, imagine it with flying. If you're trying to learn to fly, you need to fly consistently to get better and to correct errors you made the last time. And so you are correct. It's the environment we have in Arizona that makes this such a rich aviation space. And for the civilians too. There are more private pilot training schools in Arizona than probably any state per capita in the U.S.
We could probably spend this whole podcast on 162nd. I think you have so much going on there, but I want to get a little more information into the people, and maybe we could switch to DM. The A-10 is an older aircraft, a phenomenal aircraft that can fly slowly and give air protection to ground troops and everything else, but that aircraft's going to be phased out eventually. And DM is talking about bringing a new helicopter, massive, massive squadron, or what's going to happen here. I'm a little ignorant on that. Actually, the 3-star, and I can't remember the general's name, to be honest with you, made a conference call to all of us in the region and said, hey, the A-10 is going. But we are bringing in a helicopter aircraft that is just state-of-the-art. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, they are. What's happening at Davis-Monthan, and I'm far from an expert on it, but I know enough to be dangerous. The A-10 is forecast to be retired by the end of the decade on U.S. standards. Now, there may be some units that they will keep around. The A-10 is a phenomenal machine that nobody does combat search and rescue better than they do. Nobody does close air support for our troops in contact better than they do. There's stuff that the A-10 cannot do, and I think they're still working on what the ultimate replacement for that mission will be. And it's important to the Army as well as the Air Force. So we'll see what's going to happen. But the bottom line is the Air Force is concerned about operating in a non-cooperative environment. The operations we've been in the last couple decades, we've had total air control of the skies. Not necessarily true in the battles we may face in the future. So one of the things they're looking at doing is phasing out the A-10, finding a replacement. And what's going to happen at Davis-Monthan, and this is in a large part because of the things we talked about earlier. The environment in Arizona is so great for flying. Davis-Monthan is an asset. They've won the base of the year for the last 2 years in Air Combat Command. That is not a base or an organization that the Air Force wants to see closed down. So they are going to bring in a new search and rescue, predominantly search and rescue, but special operations wing into the area. It's going to be the 492nd Power Projection Wing is the name they're going to give it. And it's going to operate under Air Force Special Operations Command. Now, we've already got a rescue group out at Davis-Monthan, which flies both helicopters. They also work with the EC-130s. We've got the HC-130s. We've got a lot of the assets that are out there will remain. What's going to happen is slowly the A-10s will draw down. And what we're going to get some new aircraft. I know Senator Kelly's been working hard to bring some of the new state-of-the-art modern EC-130s. And the plane that's converting from the EC-130 is going to be an EC-37. It's going to look like a Learjet, but it's going to be loaded with so much electronics, it can do some amazing things. But the one you're talking about is going to be the new HH-60W. So yes, it's still the Jolly Greens, but this is the Jolly Green 2, and it's the new state-of-the-art one. It's going to be large. It's going to be big. It's going to have a lot of capability during combat search and rescue. So that's probably implying that's going to have a lot of self-protection, as well as the ability to go in and get out downed troops or trapped units from locations. There's also going to be the HC-130J, the Combat King. It's the new state-of-the-art CSAR 130. It's also going to come to the unit. Now, the important thing is one of the important things is what impacts that can have on Tucson.
Right.
The expected manning is going to be the same or close to what it is right now. So we've got about 11,000 workers and airmen out at the base. That's going to remain the same over time. So the economic impact should still be there. For many in the community who have fought the transition of the F-35 possibly coming to Davis-Monthan, they can view this as it's going to be a benefit to them, because a lot of them are going to be prop aircraft. A lot of them are going to be helicopters, Learjets, so more like what we see in aviation. So the noise around in and around the town will not be as significant as if the F-35 was to come in. But the most important thing is the viability of Davis-Monthan is going to be live and well. And in the combat search and rescue capability and the Special Operations Command, they will play a critical role for our Air Force going forward.
Well, I look at, Raytheon, the University of Arizona, and Davis-Monthan, just huge employers and financial impacts on the community. The helicopter, I didn't realize 130s were coming in as well, but it's really not a combat aircraft. It may have capabilities, but it's
Correct.
really a search and rescue or move troops aircraft.
Yeah, the Jolly Greens have always been that. They've been moving troops, as you know, and a lot of people may not know, but Mayor Honey did serve in Vietnam. He was in the Navy. I won't hold that against him, but at some point, I think you should throw in some of your thoughts from your service as well. But to your point, Arizona is a huge benefactor from the military and our influence, and the number of retirees that do decide to settle in Arizona after their service. But it's also a very supportive state and community for the military.
Right.
You couldn't have as many military bases as we can. You can't go very far without somebody coming up to you and telling you thank you for your service. Arizona truly appreciates having the military here as well.
Wow. Well, to expand this a little bit and tie it to Marana, of course, I'm very partial there. Watts and AASF, Army aviation units, operate in northern Marana, right at the Pinal County line. Most of those people live in Marana. They're our friends and neighbors. And could you kind of tie them into a little bit about what's going on with the other stuff?
Absolutely. So what folks don't understand is the role sometimes with the National Guard. And the Army National Guard inside of Arizona has over 6,000 men and women who serve in that role. And one of the bigger units is the one located in Marana, which is the former Western Army Aviation Training Center. Currently, they're flying Lakotas out there, but we've got 2 squadrons of Apaches up in Phoenix as well. So the Army footprint's pretty big and diverse throughout the state of Arizona, whereas the Air Guard has just a couple locations, key locations. The Army's spread throughout the state, and people don't realize that we have that there. There's the thing about the Western Army Aviation Training Center is they are loaded with helicopter instructor pilots. So they're always looking at opportunities to expand in what they can do and support the mission.
Well, I know they have a company there from Singapore.
They do.
And they've been the primary traders. I actually met the ambassador from Singapore to the U.S. What a great honor to meet this gentleman. Had dinner with him. It's been a couple years ago. And he talked about how Singapore really held Watts in very high esteem because of the training of their officers. Most of those Singapore officers live in Marana. A lot of their children go to our schools. And they've integrated into our community. But on a smaller scale, Watts does a lot of what the 162nd does, is training international pilots that are friends to our country.
And Mayor, that's exactly true. And the Singapore pilots have trained in F-16s since they had F-16s at Tucson. So there's been a long relationship with the 162nd. And when Singapore was looking for a place to train their helicopter pilots, it coincided with the time where the big Army, so the active Army, decided to move all their training for their Apaches down back to Fort Rucker. So we had this group of instructor pilots in the helicopter missions that were available, and it was a natural fit. Singapore's fit in really well at that location. They've got more Singapore pilots down at the 162nd as well, so they know Arizona. And again, great weather, great ranges, great opportunities, great instructors, and it was a perfect fit. And as you said, the impact it brings to the community is undeniable as well, because now you've exposed all the folks in Marana to a country they may not otherwise have had a lot of experience with, and we realize the level of partnership that we truly have worldwide on a lot of the, in a large part due to our military partnerships as well.
Wow. Well, I'm going to wrap up this podcast, but I want to thank my friend, Major General Ted Maxwell.
Thank you, Mayor.
And, you've really enlightened us. A lot of times people know of things from the outside, the impact on the community or whatever, but they don't know the inside operation of the 162nd. I had the honor of being at your retirement out there. What a great event. And just as an aside, the General and I belong to VFW 5990 in Marana. And the General picked me up one day and we went out to the VFW. And I thought, well, I'll introduce him to a few people around there. Well, somebody in there recognized the General and started calling people. The place was overrun with folks. I will tell you that your staff at the 162nd, which a lot of those airmen and airwomen love you and respect you. And I remember that day very, very fondly, and how well respected you are, not only in the civilian community, but in the military community.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor, but don't sell yourself short. You hold court at that VFW. We know it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
So thank you all for tuning in, and tune in again. We'll have more podcasts with individuals in the community to talk about what's happening here.